Hello and welcome to the Ori Spotlight podcast. I'm your host, Jason Foster. This week we have Boro Dropulic, the CEO of Vector Biomed, with us. Boro has an extensive career in cell and gene therapy and will be known to many of our audience. And it's Boro, it's great to have you on. Thanks so much for coming to speak to us.
Jason, thanks for having me.
Wanted to start out, if you don't mind, with a bit of a backwards view, a historical view about your work with Lentigen, and then which is now part of Miltenyi, most people would know. And then we'll get to some of your more current activities with Caring Cross and Vector Biomed. Could you just give us a little bit about your career journey and kind of how you ended up here today?
Sure. I graduated from the University of Western Australia. I'm a virologist by training. Then I was lucky enough to get a postdoctoral fellow at the NIH, focused on gene therapy in the late 1980s. So I've been in the field for quite a long time. Did a couple of postdocs there, and the most recent one there was focused on HIV molecular biology. So I learned a lot about our HIV pathogenesis, biology, molecular biology, and then when I left the NIH and joined the faculty at Johns Hopkins, I and others had the idea of using HIV as a vector, as a delivery system. So I started working there on the concept. We had some very, very good data, and then created my first company. I could see that in an academia, it was going to be very difficult to develop something, and that's what I really wanted to do. I wanted to more have an impact with developing something rather than necessarily looking at different aspects of interesting science. So I was able to raise funds for the first company. We started in Gaithersburg, Maryland, and we were the first group to put lenties into human clinical trials and establish their safety. And that was a collaboration with Carl June and Bruce Levine at the University of Pennsylvania. And then after that, I started a company called Lentigen. And during the early days, we continued to collaborate with Carl and Bruce on developing the vector that eventually became Kymriah. It was given to Novartis, and Novartis, took it all the way to commercial. Fantastic result, I think. And then in the interim, Lentigen was sold to Miltenyi, and there we developed quite a successful couple of business units. One was a CDMO business for lentiviral vector manufacturing. Another is developing some candidates that I think Miltenyi is now taking all the way to commercial. At least they're in mature clinical trials. And then really focused a lot on this point of care idea, point of care manufacturing, using the Prodigy device, which is a great device, to manufacture CAR T cells locally at the site of the hospital. So I initiated a lot of clinical trials back in those days. And then I transitioned to start the nonprofit Caring Cross, which sort of like is not industry driven, it's nonprofit driven in the sense that we really collaborate with hospitals and governments to make these therapies, affordable and accessible.
Fantastic. Yeah, no, I think you've always struck me as someone who has that kind of entrepreneur's agitation where maybe academia wouldn't have suited you as a long-term career, and getting out into industry and making an impact that you've certainly done makes more sense from that perspective. So just to explore a bit deeper into, so you wear two hats as I understand it, and correct me if I'm wrong.
That's correct.
So Caring Cross you just covered briefly, and we're going to dig more into that, but there's also another hat under the Vector Biomed umbrella. So can you tell us a little bit about that before we get started?
Yeah, so Caring Cross is a nonprofit, and we're really focused on kind of innovation, developing, for example, low-cost workflows, open source kind of workflows that hospitals can then use to manufacture CAR T cells, for instance. The biggest single cost is the vector, right? And what we could not rely upon is a typical CDMO to provide a price for vectors that we think would be reasonable for low middle income countries. So the team and I, we know how to make vectors, and so we spun out a B corporation
Mhm.
company in the same facility that we are here in Gaithersburg, Maryland, with full
Mhm.
GMP to produce vectors at an affordable cost. We're about half the price of other competitors, but then also doing something special for low middle income countries.
Mm.
So that's the two hats. So I'm the CEO of Vectra Biomed, and I'm the executive director of Caring Cross. And the synergies are amazing. I mean,
Mm.
so what is developed at Caring Cross can sometimes pass into Vectra Biomed as a new technology that can be made available to the commercial space, and then the GMP capabilities of Vectra Biomed are very useful to produce low cost vector, particularly for hospitals or other organizations that need this vector at low cost in their countries.
Absolutely. No, I think your mission under those two organizational umbrellas and Ori's have quite a significant amount of overlap in that, we are focused on enabling widespread patient access to life-saving cell and gene therapies, not only in the Western world, but everywhere in the world. And it sounds like we've got a singular vision amongst those organizations in trying to do that, which is fantastic. Wanted to understand, just since you touched on the point, in today's world, my data may be out of date, but my understanding is that viral vector for some of the commercial CAR T products can be as much as 25% of cost of goods, maybe even, $40,000 a dose potentially, that much at the high end. What's your expectation, or what do maybe where do you see the industry being able to get those costs to? Because obviously that's a significant contributor to overall costs and ultimately the price of these products.
Yeah, yeah. The cost of vector per dose is 10,000, and we can see how we can drive that cost down. So 10,000, and the rest of our workflow, it's not an automated device like your device. It's more of a simple off-the-shelf G-Rex
Hmm.
workflow, and the rest of the cost of all the other materials is about 10,000. So material cost for CAR T. $20,000, 10 being
Hmm.
vector, 10 being the rest of the
The rest.
materials needed. Yeah.
Fantastic, fantastic. So let's dive into that a little bit more. I know you and I have discussed some of the initiatives that Caring Cross is engaged in, particularly in developing markets, and I know you've got some partners that you're working with. Maybe we can mention some of them here, if you're free to do so. But did you tell me about some initiatives in South America or Middle East that you're involved in that you could tell us more about?
I can certainly tell you a little bit about the initiative in Latin America, and more specifically with Brazil. So we have a partnership with an organization called Fiocruz, who also has their own company called Biomagninos, and together they manufacture biologics. They're probably the largest biologics manufacturer in all of Latin America.
Mm.
They made the COVID vaccine. They made the EPO. They make other biologics. And we have a partnership with them that is funded through the Ministry of Health in Brazil to completely technology transfer everything that they need to make CAR T cells. This including the CAR T manufacturing process and also the lentiviral vector manufacturing process, so that they can make vector and the CAR T cells there locally for an affordable price. And the total price that we're really predicting here, this is at the high end right now, is $35,000 a dose. That
Mm.
includes, the $20,000 of materials, and then the infrastructure and labor costs being maybe another 15,000, which is they're a highly skilled force, but they're less costly, right, in
Mm.
terms of the labor costs than say here in the US. So very excited with that collaboration. It's already in full swing. And we're already in the process of reaching our milestones here in order to tech transfer, all the things that they need, including the SOPs, to manufacture all the components of these products. And it's not
Mm.
only the manufacturing, but it's also candidates. So we have a TRICAR for leukemia and lymphoma. We have other candidates in our pipeline. So the collaboration will involve multiple candidates over the course of many years. So very excited with this collaboration. We're using it as a model, and we're having discussions in other places around the world, like some of the places you mentioned, to
Hmm.
have similar discussions of tech transfer and enablement as well.
Fantastic. Yeah, starting to realize that vision already, which is great. When do you expect patients to either be starting to be treated in clinical trials or approved products? Within the next 3 to 5 years, I'm guessing, something like that.
Actually, we're on a shorter track than that. We'll be in clinical trials next year
Hmm.
in Brazil, and then we have already a plan for a rapid trajectory for approval. So
Fantastic.
it'll take maybe another year or two. You see, the candidates that we have are fairly low risk. They build upon the knowledge that's already there. They have freedom to operate. They're slightly improved in one way or another, but they have a very high chance for success given already the knowledge that is out there in the field.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic for patients. How does this, and maybe there's a broader set of issues to discuss here. What is your view on clearly cost of goods is a big challenge currently. Highly skilled labor you discussed. What are some of the biggest challenges in your mind, or the things that are kind of holding back the advanced therapies industry from being, or from the products that are currently approved or being approved, from really being affordable and accessible for patients? As you look kind of holistically at current processes, current therapies, what do you see that has those kind of biggest challenges that need to be tackled?
Well, you said it. It's the high cost when you have a product that costs, 400,000, and some of the stem cell products in the multiple millions. It becomes very difficult to get insurance approval because of the very, very high cost. And that's partly as a result of the structures that are in place for cell and gene therapies. The centralized manufacturing model is very expensive, right? Those logistics are very expensive to establish and maintain. And there are many other reasons. So we're believers of point of care manufacturing, where they can significantly reduce the costs, a tenfold reduction, as you can see from the materials and the labor, particularly when you leverage the hospital infrastructure. So we think that is a potential way forward to reduce the cost, not to obviate the commercial products, but I think that there can be a harmonization whereby you have commercially approved products that are approved, and when they're accessible, absolutely, they're reimbursable. But in those situations where patients are not getting access, either because of the high cost and because of their, particular socioeconomic status, or because they're in a low middle income country, then I think there are other ways to do this, that there could be other pathways that could be investigated in order to provide those patients that are not getting access, the access that they need. For example, when you have insurance delays of over several weeks to a couple of months for patients with advanced cancer who can't wait that long, to me that's really unacceptable. So we have to find other pathways of approval. And one thing to think about is so that in the instance where a commercial product cannot provide the product in time or in an economically viable manner, that there are other mechanisms, like can hospitals then make those products locally, safely and efficiently, so that everybody can be treated.
Yeah. No, it's a hot topic of debate, as you know, in the industry, and trying to maintain quality and also improve access at the same time. And how do we do that? One of the things you mentioned is interesting to further explore, I think, which is, I've talked to many, many stakeholders in the industry over the last couple of years about this particular topic. And I've postulated, and would love to hear your opinion on that, even if the cost were zero, we wouldn't be able to serve the patient population that needs to be served, because not only the cost, it is certainly cost is a driver of limited access, certainly. We have a physical limitation today, an inability to deliver enough doses to put them through the manufacturing process fast enough and at a high enough volume, and also with a high enough quality. I hear failure rates in the 20 to 40% in GMP processes for some advanced therapies, which is, astronomical when you look at pharmaceutical manufacturing. So for me, it's both. It's cost reduction, absolutely critical, as you said, but there's also a need to increase throughput and increase quality at the same time. Do you see that? Do you agree with that kind of that thesis?
I think that's why point of care is a very interesting solution. When a small GMP facility can make a couple of hundred products a year, just a single suite. We've modeled it out. And that's more than enough for any particular indication. I mean, any one hospital won't have, more than 100 leukemia or lymphoma patients in any one year. Only the very large hospitals have that. And then you can have, two two suites if necessary.
Hmm.
So I think that, and then the geographical access is also very important. That it's sometimes very difficult for patients to reach some of these very large medical centers. So there has to be an improved distribution model out there as well.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. We've done I've sat on several panels around what we call distributed manufacturing or point of care manufacturing, as you called it, multi-site, and this kind of thesis of making the same product from a regulatory and quality perspective in multiple locations today is incredibly difficult given the manual nature of the processes we have, the paper-based systems we often use to release them or to manage the quality process. And one of the things that I say, and I'm curious of your view, is I think digital technologies are absolutely critical to the efficient and effective utilization of a decentralized model. You
Mhm.
could even have such that you have a kind of a hub and spoke model where you have multiple sites manufacturing, but maybe you manage some of the quality process centrally, because
Yeah.
obviously these resources are hard to put in the right places at the right times. What's your view on that? I mean, do you view technology and digital as a way to enable this to happen in a high quality, GMP sort of way?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there are 2 points there. The first point is the quality systems. And so in a decentralized network of sites that manufacture, you don't necessarily have to have a decentralized quality system, right?
Yes.
You can actually have more of a hub and spoke model. We have a reference facility that can release the product remotely. You don't need to have quality people on site that can review documentation, and that way
Right.
maintain a high quality amongst the network. And we've shown in the previous studies that have been published that you can very reproducibly make the product between multiple sites. I haven't seen the high failure rates, at least with our products, that you are, stating there. It doesn't have to be so high, particularly if the process is very simple, right?
Hmm.
You can
Hmm.
have a high failure rate if your processes are not robust and if your processes are don't isolate the right cell type, for instance, right? So,
Mm.
for example, in CAR T, you have a lot higher failure rates for products that don't isolate the T cells, that just use PBMCs as your starting material. Then you're going to have that high variability because of all these other cells that are in the mix. But when you
Mm.
purify the T cells and then add your vector, you get a highly reproducible product. And that's what we've published in the past. But yeah,
Yeah.
getting back to the whole thing about quality, yeah, I think you have to have a hierarchical quality system where you have a reference facility, monitoring, and while the point of care facilities manufacturing and testing, and having a robust and simple, not necessarily automated. Automated, I think, is important for the future, but I think simplicity is very important as well. You don't need
Mm.
a highly complicated process in order to create good product.
Yeah, agree. Um, but really to facilitate the quality process, you just can't have 1,000-page paper batch record that sits
No,
in the site and that needs to be reviewed on site. It just doesn't work
correct.
in the model that you've just articulated. So that
Yeah, it
kind of
all has to
digital
be
digital element is super important. Yeah.
It's very important. The old electronic batch records and being able to work through a cloud-based system, I think, is critical for any point of care network.
Agreed. You referenced the article that you published on, replicating manufacturing in two different locations. I was trying to remember this yesterday, actually. Was it Cleveland and Moscow? Did I remember that correctly?
Yeah, Cleveland, Ohio, and Moscow, Russia, not Moscow, Idaho.
I
And
thought
I
those
think,
were the
as I
two sites. I
mentioned,
couldn't remember how the backstory to that. I thought it'd be interesting to cover.
yeah, I mean, we have great collaborators, Marcus de Lima, who was at Case Western at that time, and then Michael Machan, who is still in Moscow. I don't think we could do that study today, given the political environment. But at that time, we actually just published it in December of 2021. But great collaborators and shown a highly consistent product. And we're not the only ones. I mean, the manufacturing network in Spain that has approval of 10 sites have also shown highly reproducible manufacturing amongst their sites there in Spain, and they get reimbursed through their national insurance system. So, and there are similar, initiatives going on in other places of the world, including India as well.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, we didn't replicate the methodology, but we did replicate a piece of that work with our partners at CTMC and National Resilience. So Jason Baku, I think you probably know,
Sure.
had presented some of this data at ISCT, where we tech transferred a clinical stage process from their existing platform onto the Ori system in Houston did some runs there showing that we could meet their CQAs with the process on an automated system, but then tech transferred to a second site and did parallel manufacturing in two different places, 3 runs in Houston, 3 runs outside of Philadelphia. All 6 runs met their CQAs running. We sent them back to Houston for analytics, and were able to meet their release criteria for their clinical product in a very short amount of time. I think tech transfer was like 2 weeks when we did site-to-site testing. So it can absolutely be done. I think it relies on technology to be able to do that quickly and to do it well. If I remember correctly, I think the study that you did was using the Prodigy system, if I remember correctly. Yeah.
Yes, it's
Um,
living days. Yep.
it's very difficult to have manual processes being replicated in multiple locations and keep that sort of consistency there. So I think certainly technology can help with that as well. Wanted to shift gears just quickly. We talked a little bit about your role at Vector Biomed, but help us understand a little bit more about kind of the types of organizations you're working with. Is it, you said it was a B Corp, so it's a for-profit spin out of Caring Cross. At what stage is that organization? Kind of where are you in the evolution of that company? Are you working with clinical stage companies yet, or is it still R&D? Give us a little bit more about what's going on at Vector Biomed.
No, we're full GMP.
Amazing.
Working with the whole gambit of partners.
Awesome.
Providing custom lentiviral vectors for partners that need it, and then there are organizations in particular low middle income countries who want some of these more generic cars, and so we have our
Mhm.
own proprietary cars and other cars that we can make available to these organizations so that they can actually provide it locally. So yeah, I mean, we've got a fantastic team. We're located in Gaithersburg, Maryland, and full complement of everything needed. Everything from vector design, which obviously is very important, having that experience to design these vectors correctly, to a fantastic process development, GMP, quality systems team in order to produce these vectors at very high quality for our partners.
Fantastic. And um, is it, am I wrong in my thinking or the numbers that, I mean, obviously if you've got, you've gone full circle with your career now back to vector manufacturing and vector design. Why is the industry not following suit? Why have other companies, do they not have the technology necessary to develop vectors in the sort of way you have with the costs and manufacturing quality that you can produce? Or is it just that you got there first? Or I'm trying to understand why others might still be paying 20, 30, $40,000 a dose when there are obviously technologies that you've developed that could offer, significant savings and at the same level of quality or
Yeah,
better
I
maybe.
mean, when we started Vector Biomed, we went back to the drawing board. So we looked at
Mm,
all the, public information that was out there, our collective experience, and then said to ourselves, okay, how can we devise a brand new process that is better, less expensive? And that's what we've done, So,
mm,
there are many little increments of 2 to 3 fold that when you accumulate, results in something substantial. This is not like rocket science that you have to have something that is earth shattering. 2 to 3
mhm,
fold over multiple areas of the process really improves dramatically the ultimate yield. One of the nice things that we have is we have a great cell line, our own proprietary 293T cell line that produces pretty high titer vector. So you're getting in the harvest titer is over 10 to the 8 for many vectors. And
mm,
then what that means is you don't really have to concentrate so much to a target dose, right, of about 10 to the 9 typically. Because if you have
mhm.
to concentrate 100-fold, well, guess what? You get more aggregation, and that impacts yield, it impacts everything. But when you only have to concentrate about 10-fold, well, you can be surprised how your yields increase and what you need to get to a very high titer vector is not as arduous as maybe a traditional format. And many other companies, they're in a format, they've been doing it for years, and they just continue to do it.
Mm.
Starting a new company allowed us the opportunity to really sit back, go back to the drawing board, and develop something completely new.
Right. Interesting. Yeah, no, innovation is necessary in all parts of the industry, and certainly viral production is not exempted from that. I'm curious on another tact, and I'm not sure if this is a Vector Biomed partnership or Caring Cross or maybe both. We've always at Ori, we've always taken an ecosystem approach, trying to bring in best of breed partners from various domains that we think could add value to our shared collaborators, our shared partners. We've been partnered with the likes of Germ-Free and Gcon for several years, two of the leaders in the mobile clean room space, some of the software providers like Traxel and others. How do you see industry partnerships and playing a role in the future and how manufacturing evolves, maybe how your work with Carrying Cross or Vector Biomed evolves? What's the role of those industry collaborations in your view?
Uh, Partnerships are key, I think, because you only have really one piece of the puzzle, and there are so many other pieces that you need to put together. So, like you, we also have a partnership with Germ-Free.
Hmm.
We're very excited, particularly with our collaboration in Brazil. So they're making the mobile units. The Brazil partnership also is a point of care partnership
Hmm.
where mobile units will be deployed first in Rio de Janeiro and then all over the country to manufacture close to the hospital. That's what that country really demands in order to get these therapies out throughout the whole region.
Yeah.
But we have other partnerships. For example, we have a partnership with Sativa, and we worked with the Sepec C Pro and their devices there. And
Hmm.
so, any clinical site that purchases a Sepec C Pro will get discounts because of our collaboration with them. And then we have multiple other collaborations with other organizations. We've collaborated with Nimble quite a bit on developing kind of open source manufacturing platforms. Got collaborations with the NIH, organizations in other countries as well. So partnership, we think, is very key to this model, and we're very cognizant that we're a relatively small organization, and
Hmm.
without those partnerships, we can't flourish. So we're always very active and always very receptive to partnerships.
I think it makes sense, and we've always taken that approach as well. I mean, from my perspective, if you try and do everything, it's sort of the jack of all trades, master of none approach,
Mhm.
where you do a couple things well, but most things not that well. And it also limits flexibility. If you wanted a modular, if you wanted a mobile solution, but you're only set up for centralized or bricks and mortar or whatever, it just limits the flexibility of your partners, your customers, your collaborators to deliver care in the way they want to deliver it. And so I couldn't agree with you more that enabling flexible solutions that can meet the needs of that particular country or that particular therapeutic is critical, because if we try and jam all the square pegs into the round holes, we're going to end up with solutions that really work for no one instead of everyone, which is really the goal. So, a little bit of a shift in tack, just on the kind of topic of access a little bit. I mean, we've talked a little bit about kind of structurally how we could potentially increase throughput, decrease costs. Those will certainly we would hope help to open up access. But there's other things as well. I was thinking more about kind of on the regulatory and policy side. You mentioned Nimble as one organization that's active in this area. What are your thoughts on any regulatory or policy changes that you'd like to see or that you think are necessary? I think there's some that are being considered or thought about, certainly in the US, to try and enable decentralized manufacturing. There's some, new thinking that has to happen from the regulator, but what kinds of things are you seeing and thinking about that would be useful to have from a policy or regulatory perspective for us to really enable access to patients?
Yeah, I think the regulatory authorities in the US are quite open to various modes of delivery. I think the current regulations are totally fine, but maybe an additional pathway, maybe a hospital-based point of care manufacturing pathway for those products. And for those patients in particular, they can't get access to commercial product, which we know that there's a lot of them. Maybe that will create an ability for patients that would say with advanced disease or can't afford, for some reason, the insurance companies are not approving the particular therapy, so they can have a chance to get access. So maybe a hospital BLA pathway, I think, would be something that could be very useful. It wouldn't be competitive with the commercial pathway because it would only be in the instance that a patient could not receive product. But I think it would serve a very important need that is not being served presently.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think trying to skin this cat, if you will, multiple ways probably makes sense. And I mean, one observation that I had, I think the FDA had done a decentralized workshop. I think it's now 2 years ago in November, maybe even three. It's been a while. And one of the outputs of that, which I hope I misunderstood because it doesn't really make a lot of sense to me, but if you had a piece of equipment that was being used in a manufacturing facility in a kind of centralized model, It could be um, classed as manufacturing equipment, which has, a particular path, and that's what our Eero platform is. It's considered to be manufacturing equipment. So we will put a master file in with the agency, and our partners will reference that master file as part of their filing. That's a pretty standard path. However, if technology was being used to manufacture the same product, but at the hospital, it would be considered to be a medical device and have to go through the medical device pathway. Now, that doesn't make a huge amount of sense to me. Maybe I misunderstood. But I think there's certainly, as you said, a harmonization effort that needs to be focused on, opening up access and trying to eliminate unnecessary regulation that doesn't necessarily enhance patient safety, and which is what, really the job of the regulator is, as they would position it. So hopefully I got that wrong, but we'll see how it all unfolds.
Yeah, I wasn't at that meeting, so but I do know that there are other meetings planned to explore this topic of point of care manufacturing. So I'm sure there'll be other meetings here in the near future because there's intense interest now around it.
Agreed. Yeah, there is a lot of interest in the industry. Fantastic. So we're coming close to the end of our time together, and thanks again so much for spending a half hour, 45 minutes with us. I did want to ask you, given your long-standing leadership in the industry, in your view, what does good look like in the next 5 to 10 years? What's your hope? What direction do you anticipate the industry to be headed in over the next decade? And what should we expect to see within that time frame, do you think?
Well, in the United States, like I said, an ecosystem of commercial products that are approved, faster delivery for patients because the companies that make them improve upon their manufacturing delivery times, but also broadening of that ecosystem to a hospital-based manufacturing approval pathway so that hospitals could manufacture products for those patients for whatever reason can't get the approved products in time because
Mm.
it's the life of the patient that I think is the most important thing here above everything else.
Agreed, and a great point to end the discussion on. I think the last time I saw a statistic around this, unfortunately, something on the order of 25% of patients were actually dying while waiting, either on the waiting list or waiting for drug or something else. And that's an unacceptable outcome, I think, from all of our perspectives. So I wish
It's
you
an
the best of
absolute
luck.
it's an
Go
absolute
ahead.
tragedy that
It
happens.
is.
It's an absolute tragedy.
It
So
is. I agree 100%. So I wish you the best of luck with Caring Cross and the work you're doing there. And let me know if we can ever be of assistance. Would love to partner with you and our friends at Germfree or any others that you're working with for our shared mission. Because I think ultimately we share a vision where there's open access for every patient who needs it, regardless of where they are in the world.
yeah, absolutely, Jason. Again, thanks very much for inviting me, and I'm sure we'll be talking again very soon. And again, thanks for your time.